How Juliane Koepcke survived a plane crash in an 11-day solo journey in the Peruvian jungle. Juliane Koepcke was flying over the Peruvian rainforest with her mother when her plane was hit by lightning and crashed. She was just 17 years old when it happened, and she had to survive on her own in the jungle. How did a 17-year-old teenage girl survive a plane crash in a solo 11-day trek in the Peruvian jungle? Here is Juliane Koepcke's story. It happened on Christmas Eve 1971. Juliane and her mother were eager to get back home and were waiting to get on the plane that was already 7 hours late. They got on the plane, and suddenly during the flight, the plane entered a patch of pitch-dark clouds. A few minutes later, they started to notice that something was wrong. The plane was thrashing up and down because of very heavy turbulence. The turbulence was so bad at one point that their bags fell out of the overhead compartments. Suddenly they saw a flash of lightning. Passengers started to weep and scream. A few minutes later, another very bright light hit the plane on the outer engine on the left. Juliane shared that her mother's last words on that plane were, "This is the end, it's all over." The plane started to nosedive, people were screaming, and suddenly the noise stopped and Juliane found herself outside the plane. The plane had broken into pieces about 2 miles above the ground, and Juliane was in a free fall, strapped to her seat. Juliane lost consciousness and woke up the next day in the forest thinking to herself, "I survived a plane crash." Juliane was injured and all alone in the heart of the jungle. She broke her collarbone and had deep cuts on her legs. She lost one sandal and her glasses and was wearing nothing but a sleeveless mini dress. The weather was very hot and very wet during the daytime but very cold during the night. Juliane could hear the planes overhead searching for the downed plane, but they didn't see her because she was inside dense forest. She was very afraid of starving, although she found a bag with sweets in the crash site that helped her in the first few days. 4 days later, following the sounds of vultures, she found 3 corpses of dead passengers. None of them were her mother. She kept on moving, and one day she stumbled on a really large boat. She thought that she was hallucinating, but it was real. She decided to stay there and wait for the owners to come back. The next day, several men found her next to the boat. They helped her, treated her wounds, gave her something to eat, and took her back to civilization. Juliane was the only survivor of this flight, and they found her mother's body a few days after she was rescued. Although her mother also survived the crash at first, she was badly injured during the crash and couldn't move, and so didn't survive much past the crash. So how was Juliane able to survive on her own for 11 days in the jungle? Well, Juliane Koepcke was raised by scientists. Hans Wilhelm Koepcke, her father, was a renowned zoologist, and Maria Koepcke, her mother, was a scientist who studied tropical birds. In fact, Juliane was actually raised in the Peruvian jungle, the jungle which she had to survive in. Before the crash, Juliane had spent a year and a half with her parents on their research station only 30 miles away from the point where she fell. In one of the interviews later, she shared that she learned a lot about life in the rainforest. And that actually, the jungle wasn't as dangerous as most people think. One of the first things Juliane did to survive in the jungle was to walk in the water of a small creek she found because she knew it was safer. This helped her get to the river and find the boat. She remembered that her father said that people always live near the water. This is what kept her walking in the creek, which eventually got her to the river. Another interesting thing that happened when she got to the boat was her use of gasoline to treat a wound she had that was infested with maggots. She remembered their dog had the same infection and that her father had put kerosene in it, so she sucked the gasoline out and put it into the wound, which killed the maggots and helped her wound. Over the years, Juliane has struggled to understand how she came to be the only survivor of LANSA Flight 508. Juliane is now a biologist specializing in bats. She continues to share her incredible story. And she still runs Penguana, her family's legacy that stands proudly in the forest that transformed her.